key did not turn. Vivienne Hart stood at the door of the apartment she had lived in for 9 years. Her key lodged halfway in the lock, going nowhere. She tried again. Slowly this time, gently. The way you handle something you are not yet ready to accept is broken. The key turned no further. She stepped back and looked at the door as though it owed her an explanation. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of gray New York afternoon that smells like rain and old ambition. Vivienne had spent the morning in New Jersey at her mother's house, helping sort through old photographs and eating reheated chicken soup at a kitchen table that had known better decades. She had taken the 2:47 train back into the city, her tote bag on her shoulder, a small smile on her face, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether she should cook tonight or order in. Now she stood in the hallway of the 14th floor of a building on the Upper West Side, and her key did not turn, and there were 4 cardboard boxes stacked against the wall beside the door with her name written on each one in Carter's handwriting, neat, deliberate, emotionless. Vivienne, 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 Vivienne. 4 boxes. 10 years of a life, and it fit into 4 cardboard boxes. She did not knock right away. She stood there for a long moment, her hand still resting on the key, her mind refusing to fully assemble what her eyes were telling it. Then she heard movement inside the apartment. A soft laugh, a familiar creak of the kitchen floorboards, the clink of glassware, and something in her chest went very, very still. She knocked. There was a pause. Then footsteps, unhurried and unbothered, crossing the apartment she had decorated, had cleaned, had filled with flowers every Sunday because Carter always said he liked coming home to flowers even though he had never once bought them himself. The door opened. Savannah Blake stood in the doorway wearing Vivienne's white terrycloth robe, the one with the frayed left cuff that Vivienne had been meaning to replace for months, holding a glass of red wine, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, her blue eyes carrying the particular cruelty of someone who has already won and knows it. "Vivienne," she said. Not a greeting. Statement of fact. An acknowledgement that this was awkward and that she did not particularly mind. "Where is Carter?" Vivienne's voice came out even. She was mildly surprised by this. "He's at the office." Savannah tilted her head slightly. "He said you'd probably come by. His lawyer sent everything to your email this morning." "I haven't checked my email." "I know, Oz. The boxes are all your things." He was very careful about it. Vivienne looked at the boxes. She looked back at Savannah. She thought about the 9 years she had given to this apartment, to this marriage, to a man she had believed in the way you believe in something you built with your own hands. She thought about the Sunday flowers. She thought about the way she had learned to sleep on the left side of the bed because Carter liked the right, had learned to keep the television low because he was a light sleeper, had learned to shrink and adjust and accommodate until the shape of her life was entirely determined by the comfort of someone else's. She did not cry. She was aware of the possibility of crying the way you are aware of a fire exit in a building. It was there, she could see it, she chose not to use it. "Thank you," she said, and she was not certain what she was thanking Savannah for, but she said it anyway, picked up 2 of the 4 boxes and walked back to the elevator. Took 3 trips. She called Harper from the lobby, standing among her boxes while the doorman, Eduardo, who had known her for 9 years and could not look her in the eye, pretended to be absorbed in something on his desk. "Come get me," Vivienne said when Harper answered. That was all. Harper did not ask questions. She said, "I'm leaving now," and she hung up. Harper arrived in 22 minutes in a yellow cab with her coat half-buttoned and her hair in a bun that had not quite decided what it was doing. She took one look at Vivienne standing on the sidewalk beside 4 cardboard boxes and said, with a kind of quiet fury that only a best friend can produce, "I will destroy him." "Not today," Vivienne said. They loaded the boxes into 2 cabs. Harper had called ahead to a hotel in Midtown. Nothing extravagant, but clean and quiet and far enough from the Upper West Side that Vivienne would not have to think about which direction she was facing. They rode in the second cab together in silence for most of the trip, Harper's hand over Vivienne's on the seat between them, neither of them needing to narrate what had just happened. The hotel was a mid-sized place near Bryant Park with a lobby that smelled like sandalwood and carpet cleaner. Vivienne checked in, carried her boxes to the room with the help of a bellhop who was far too cheerful for the occasion, and then came back downstairs because she could not sit in that room alone yet. She sat at the hotel bar. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. A few business travelers nursing drinks, a couple in the corner arguing in whispers, a bartender who had the professional gift of not making eye contact unless summoned. Vivienne ordered the house Chardonnay, the cheapest thing on the menu. She sat with it in both hands and looked at the dark wood of the bar top and thought, with a clarity that surprised her, I don't even know who I am outside of that apartment. That's a waste of a good evening. The voice came from the seat beside her. Low, unhurried, the kind of voice that occupied space without asking permission. She looked up. The man was in his mid-30s, fair-skinned, dark-haired, with sharp features that would have been beautiful if they weren't quite so unreadable. He was dressed in a dark suit without a tie. His collar open, a glass of something amber in front of him. He was not looking at her with pity or curiosity. He was looking at her the way you look at something you recognize, like he already knew something about her that she hadn't said yet. He nodded at her glass. You don't actually want that. I ordered it. You ordered it because it was the cheapest option. He raised 2 fingers toward the bartender. That usually means someone is either being careful with money or punishing themselves. Either way, the bartender replaced her glass without a word, setting down something pale gold and clearly expensive. You deserve better than what you ordered. Vivienne looked at the new glass. She looked at him. I don't accept drinks from strangers. You haven't accepted it yet. He returned his gaze to the middle distance, unhurried, unbothered. You can leave it there. But it would be a shame. She should have left it. She knew that even then. But there was something in the way he had said you deserve better. Not as a line, not with performance, but flatly like an observation about weather, that loosened something tight in her chest. She picked up the glass. It was extraordinary. I'm Vivienne, she said. He turned and looked at her, and for the first time that evening, something crossed his expression that was not quite a smile but lived in the same neighborhood. I know, he said. She blinked. We've never met. No. He lifted his own glass. But I asked the front desk when you checked in. She did not know whether to be alarmed or flattered. She settled somewhere between the two. That's either charming or concerning. Most interesting things are both. He took a sip. Get some sleep, Vivienne. Tomorrow will be easier than today. They usually are. He set a card on the bar beside her glass. Plain white, a name and a number, nothing else. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked away without looking back. She looked at the card. Luca Moretti. She turned it over. Blank on the back. She set it down, finished the wine he had ordered for her, and went upstairs to sleep in a hotel room surrounded by her 4 cardboard boxes, in a city that felt, for the first time in a very long time, entirely her own. Harper found out first, the way Harper always found out everything, through a combination of relentless Googling and an instinct for trouble that bordered on supernatural. She showed up at Vivienne's hotel room the next morning with 2 coffees and her phone screen turned outward, and she said without preamble, "The man from the bar last night. Tell me his name." Vivienne, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed in yesterday's clothes with Carter's lawyer's email open on her laptop, looked up. How do you know about the man from the bar? Eduardo the doorman texted me. He felt guilty. Harper sat on the edge of the bed. Name. Luca Moretti. Vivienne turned back to her laptop. He bought me a glass of wine. It wasn't. Vivienne. Harper's voice had changed. She held up her phone. Look at this. The search results were extensive. Luca Moretti, 36, CEO of Moretti Group, one of New York's most prominent luxury hospitality brands. There were photographs, charity galas, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, a Forbes profile from 2 years ago that described him as quietly dominant in New York's premium real estate and hospitality sector. He photographed like power looked, composed, expensive, and entirely uninterested in the camera. But there were other results further down. Articles that didn't have bylines. Forum threads that had been mostly scrubbed. References, oblique, careful, never quite direct, to the Moretti name in contexts that had nothing to do with hotel lobbies. People say his family, Harper began. I see it, Vivienne said. He's not just a businessman. I gathered. Vivienne, this man is. I had one glass of wine with him. Vivienne closed her laptop. I don't need a background check on everyone who's kind to me in a hotel bar. Harper gave her a look that contained multitudes. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Then she looked at Vivienne with an expression that Vivienne had learned over 20 years of friendship meant brace yourself. He sent you a message, Harper said. How does he have my number? I don't know, and that is part of the problem. Harper handed over the phone. The message had come through Instagram. Vivienne's account, rarely used, mostly pictures of food and the occasional sunset. The message was brief. Have a position open. Hotel Operations Manager, Moretti Grand Midtown. I think you'd be good at it. No pressure. Vivienne read it twice. She thought about her bank account, which was not catastrophic but was not comfortable either. She thought about the joint accounts Carter's lawyer had already moved to freeze pending the divorce proceedings. She thought about 4 cardboard boxes and a hotel room she was paying for by the night. She thought about the way Luca Moretti had said you deserve better without once making it about himself. She typed back. I'd need to understand the role before I could consider it. His reply came in 40 seconds. Tuesday 10 a.m. I'll send an address. The Moretti Grand was not what Vivienne had expected, though she wasn't certain what she had expected. It occupied the lower 12 floors of a glass tower on 57th Street, its lobby a study in restrained extravagance. Dark marble, warm lighting, staff who moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had been trained within an inch of their lives. Everything was beautiful and nothing was loud about it. Luca met her in the lobby himself, which she had not anticipated. He was dressed similarly to the night before. Dark suit, no tie, the collar of his shirt open one button, and he shook her hand with the grip of someone who had done it 1,000 times and meant it every time. You came, he said. I said I would. People say a lot of things. He gestured toward the elevator. Let me show you the property first. Then we can talk about the role. He walked her through the hotel with the fluency of a man who had built it from the ground up, which she would later learn, he essentially had. He knew the name of every department head they passed. He knew which suite on the 9th floor had a recurring problem with water pressure, and which elevator ran 2 seconds slower than it should. He spoke about the guest experience not as a product to be optimized but as something he genuinely cared about getting right, and this more than anything surprised her. In his office, clean, sparse, a single large window overlooking the city. He outlined the position. Operations manager, overseeing guest services, vendor relationships, staff training, and the day-to-day running of the property. The salary he named was more than she had made in her last job before she had quietly folded her career into the shape of Carter's life. Why me? She asked. You don't know me. I know enough. He leaned back in his chair. I know you ran the charitable foundation attached to your husband's company for 4 years before he removed you from the board. I know that under your management it tripled its annual fundraising output. I know you have a master's degree in hospitality management from Cornell that you have never once used professionally. He paused. I know that you sat alone at a bar last night and ordered the cheapest wine on the menu and held yourself together in a way that most people couldn't manage. Vivienne was quiet for a moment. You had me looked into. I had you looked into, he confirmed without apology. That should bother me more than it does. Probably. He picked up a pen, turned it once between his fingers, set it down. The job is real, Vivienne. I'm not offering you charity. I need someone capable running this property. Whether you believe that is up to you. She looked at him across the desk. His expression was what it always seemed to be. Steady, direct, unreadable at the edges. I have conditions, she said. Name them. I'm not a favor. I'm an employee. I expect to be treated as one. Agreed. I don't discuss my personal life at work. Neither do I. And if at any point this stops feeling like a professional arrangement, you walk. He said it before she finished. The door stays open from your side. Always. She took the job. That same afternoon, across town, Carter Whitfield posted a photograph on Instagram. He and Savannah at dinner at a restaurant Vivienne had always wanted to go to and Carter had always said was overrated. Savannah in a red dress, Carter with his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling the large, performed smiles of people who are trying to convince themselves and everyone watching that they are happy. The comments were full of fire. Vivienne's name appeared in 47 of them in the first hour. Harper screenshotted each one and sent them to Vivienne with a single message. "Don't look at these. I'm looking at them so you don't have to." Vivienne did not look. She was reading the employee manual for the Moretti Grand, making notes in the margins, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the particular quiet satisfaction of her own mind doing what it was built to do. She did not check Carter's Instagram. She did not cry. She made herself a cup of terrible hotel room coffee and got back to work. Loving the story so far. Follow Stories by Niksy for more gripping tales of betrayal, power, and love that hits different. New stories posted regularly. By the end of her third week at the Moretti Grand, Vivienne had reorganized the vendor contract system, retrained the front desk staff on guest escalation protocols, identified a linen supplier who had been quietly overcharging for 14 months, and stayed past midnight on 2 separate occasions to personally oversee a high-profile guest arrival that the previous operations manager had fumbled twice. Luca noticed all of it. He said nothing directly. That was not his style. But she would arrive in the morning to find that whatever she had flagged the evening before had already been addressed, sometimes before she had formally submitted the note. He read everything she sent him, often within minutes, and his replies were brief and precise and always substantive. He did not waste words. She found, to her surprise, that she respected this enormously. Their working relationship had a rhythm that felt both professional and strangely intimate, not in the way that made her uncomfortable, but in the way of two people who have quickly calibrated to each other's frequency without meaning to. He anticipated her questions. She anticipated his concerns. In meetings with department heads, they had, on 3 occasions, reached the same conclusion at the same moment and looked at each other with the mild surprise of people who are not yet used to being understood. She noticed that the staff treated Luca differently from how she had seen employees treat executives before. Not with the anxious performance of people managing up, but with something quieter, a particular kind of deference that had nothing to do with org charts. She noticed that certain conversations stopped when she entered a room she had not been expected in. She noticed that Luca had a separate phone, slim, matte black, no visible case, that he sometimes stepped out to take calls on, and that when he returned from these calls his expression was the same as always except for something infinitesimal around his jaw. She did not ask. They had an agreement about personal lives. What she did let herself notice, carefully, reluctantly, like a woman cataloging something she is not ready to act on, was the way he looked at her. Not often. Not obviously. But sometimes when she was in the middle of explaining something and did not realize he had stopped listening to the words and started paying attention to her, she would glance up and catch it. A steadiness in his gaze that was not professional in the way she was used to. It was the look of a man who is not in a hurry because he has already decided something. She told herself she was imagining it. She was fresh out of a marriage. She was in no condition to read anything into anyone's eyes. She was probably imagining it. She was not imagining it. On a Thursday evening in late October, they were the last 2 people in the building's executive suite, reviewing proposals for a renovation to the hotel's restaurant concept. The city was visible through the wide windows, the particular electric dark of Manhattan at 9 o'clock, lit from below and alive with itself. "This one," Vivienne said, sliding a proposal across the table toward him. "The second firm. Their concept keeps the bones of what makes the space work. The first firm wants to rebuild it entirely, and there's no reason to spend $4 million fixing what isn't broken." Luca looked at the proposal. Then he looked at her. "You're right. I usually am, in matters of restaurants." She said it lightly as a joke, and then caught the way he was still looking at her and felt her own smile soften. "Tell me something," he said. He leaned back in his chair, unhurried, the city behind him. "Not about the hotel. Something about you." You said you don't discuss personal lives at work. We're done working for the night. He said it simply. Tell me something. She looked at him across the table. She thought about all the evenings she had sat across from Carter at dinner tables, and felt the particular exhaustion of talking to someone who was listening for the moment she stopped so he could speak. I used to paint, she said. Watercolors. When I was in college. I was actually good. He paused. I stopped when Carter said it was. She searched for his word. Hobbyist. Like that was an insult. Luca said nothing for a moment. Then, you should start again. It's been 10 years. So it'll be rusty. He shrugged, the smallest movement. Doesn't mean you stop. The simplicity of it struck her somewhere undefended. She looked down at the table, then back at him. Your turn, she said. Tell me something. Not about the hotel. Beep. He turned his glass once on the table. I haven't eaten a meal alone by choice in 4 years, he said. I'm always surrounded by people. But I'm alone in every room I walk into. He said it without self-pity as a fact. Until recently. The silence that followed was the kind that changes things slightly, permanently. The way a window opened in winter changes the temperature of a room even after you close it. Vivienne gathered her papers. She said quietly, Good night, Luca. He said equally quietly, Good night, Vivienne. She took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, her reflection in the dark marble caught her eye, and she stopped, just for a moment, and looked at herself. She looked like herself again. Not the polished, careful version she had been for Carter, always slightly adjusted, always slightly less. She looked like the version of herself she remembered from before. She liked what she saw. Meanwhile, across the city, Harper was at her kitchen table with a glass of wine, a legal pad, and the expression of a woman doing arithmetic she does not like the sum of. Savannah Blake had announced her pregnancy on Instagram 11 days ago. A soft-lit photograph, a caption about new chapters and unexpected blessings, a flurry of congratulations from people who did not know enough to be uncomfortable. But Harper knew things. Specifically, Harper knew that Carter and Vivienne had been to couples therapy as recently as July. Vivienne had mentioned it once, briefly, in the way you mention something you are still deciding how to feel about. And Harper knew, from an acquaintance who worked at the same firm as Carter, that Carter and Savannah's relationship had begun not 6 months ago as the official story suggested, but closer to a year ago. She did the math again. Didn't work. She called Vivienne. I need to tell you something, Harper said. And I need you to let me finish before you tell me to drop it. Harper. The baby might not be Carter's. Long pause. Let me finish, Harper said. The timeline was the thing. Once you saw it, you could not unsee it. Harper had laid it out in a document. Meticulous, sourced, the kind of thing she produced when she had decided something mattered. Savannah had announced a pregnancy at approximately 12 weeks. The relationship with Carter, by Carter's own public account in a profile piece he had given to a Manhattan lifestyle magazine, apparently unbothered by the optics, had begun the previous spring. But the dates, cross-referenced with travel records Harper had sourced from a mutual acquaintance who worked in Carter's building, showed Carter had been in London for the better part of the relevant window. The math did not add up. It was the kind of thing that, once in motion, could not be stopped. New York's social world was small in the ways that mattered. Old money, new money, and the media that covered both moved in circles that had known each other for decades. The information had not come from Vivienne. It did not need to. It came, as these things always do, from the fraying edge of Savannah's own story. A comment someone made at a dinner party, a date that didn't track in a conversation at a fundraiser, a quiet question that became a louder one. By the second week of November, it was everywhere. Vivienne heard about it first from Harper, then from the news alert she had set up for Carter's name months ago and had forgotten to cancel. She sat in her hotel room. She had moved to a furnished short-term rental in the West Village, smaller but hers, and read the headlines and felt something she had not expected. Not satisfaction. Not joy. Not even vindication. Just a quiet, exhausted grief for the years she had given to a man who had turned out to be this small. She was still sitting with that feeling when her phone rang. Carter's name on the screen. She stared at it for 4 full rings before answering. Vivienne. His voice was different from how she remembered it. Muller. The edges worn down by something. I need to talk to you. You could have talked to me in September, she said. Before the boxes. I know, and Vivienne, things with Savannah are. He stopped. Started again. I made a mistake. I think I made a mistake. You think? I know I did. She could hear him breathing. I want to talk about whether there's any possibility of. There isn't. Vivienne, just hear me. Carter. Her voice was calm. Not cold. She had no coldness left for him, which was its own kind of resolution. I heard you for 10 years. I adjusted my life for 10 years so that you would be comfortable. I shrank myself for 10 years so that you would feel large enough. He paused. I am done hearing you. She ended the call. She sat for a moment in the quiet of her apartment, with its second-hand furniture and its view of a narrow West Village street and its complete, total belonging to her. Then she made tea and went back to the operations report she had been preparing for the Moretti Grand's Q4 review. The financial interference came 10 days later. A joint account from the early years of their marriage, one Vivienne had honestly forgotten was still technically active, was used to initiate a dispute against one of her personal accounts. It was petty, the kind of financial maneuvering that attorneys did when their clients wanted to cause discomfort without crossing a clear legal line. Vivienne's own lawyer was on it within hours, but the temporary hold on her account was a disruption, and the timing, just before a rent payment, was deliberate. She had mentioned the account situation to Luca only in passing, the way you mention weather, not asking for anything, just noting the climate. She did not know what he did. She did not ask. She suspected, on some level, that she was better off not knowing. What she knew was that by noon the following day, the hold was released, the dispute was withdrawn, and her lawyer received a very brief communication from Carter's attorney indicating that the issue had been resolved and would not recur. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who had been practicing family law in Manhattan for 30 years and had seen everything, called Vivienne that afternoon and said carefully, "Whatever happened on their end, it happened very quickly. Do you have any idea why?" "No," Vivienne said, which was technically true. That evening, Luca appeared in the doorway of her office at the Moretti Grand. She was staying late again, a habit now, and set a cup of coffee on her desk without being asked. "Thank you," she said. She looked at him. "For the coffee. And for whatever else." He met her eyes. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Of course not." She wrapped her hands around the cup. "Luca. Who are you really?" He was quiet for a long moment. He moved to the window, the same window they had stood at before, the city burning below it, and stood looking out with his hands in his pockets. "I run a legitimate business," he said. "This hotel is legitimate. The foundation is legitimate. The real estate portfolio is legitimate." He paused. "My family has a history that predates me, and some of that history is not clean. I manage it. I don't hide from it. Do you do things that I shouldn't ask about?" Silence. "There are things it's better you don't know. Not because I would lie to you. Because knowledge has weight, and I don't want to put that weight on you." She thought about this. She thought about the man who had bought her a glass of wine in the lowest moment of her recent life, and had not made it about himself. About the man who had offered her a job on the basis of her actual capability, and had never once treated her like a charity case or a conquest. About the man who had sat across from her and said, "I'm alone in every room I walk into," with the evenness of someone telling the truth because they had decided she deserved it. She thought about all the ways she had been careful before, had made safe choices, had stayed inside lines that turned out not to protect her at all. "All right," she said. He turned from the window. "All right," she said again. "I'm not running." Something moved across his expression. Not quite relief, because relief implied he had been uncertain, and she was not sure Luca Moretti did uncertain. But something real under the composure. He crossed the room. He stood in front of her desk, close now, and looked at her with the same steadiness she had noticed on the first night in the hotel bar, when he had known her name before she had told him and she had felt the world tilt very slightly on its axis. "You should know," he said quietly, "that I don't do things halfway." "I'm beginning to understand that," Vivienne said. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Simple, careful, the gesture of a man who has been patient for a long time. And then he stepped back because he was still giving her room, still keeping the door open from her side. "Go home," he said. "Get some sleep." She smiled. The real smile, the one that reached her eyes, the one she had not worn in a long time. "Good night, Luca. Good night, Vivienne. You're almost at the finish line. Don't stop now." Follow Stories by Niksy so the next story finds you first. December came to New York the way December always does. With cold that means business and light that makes the city look like it is trying to apologize for itself. Wreaths on brownstone doors, the smell of roasted nuts from the corner carts, the aggressive cheerfulness of holiday music bleeding out of shop doors onto sidewalks that were full of people who were either delighted or exhausted by all of it. Vivienne walked to work most mornings now. It took 23 minutes from her West Village apartment to the Moretti Grand, and she had come to think of those 23 minutes as entirely hers. No phone calls, no emails, just the city and the cold and the particular satisfaction of moving through the world under her own direction. She had signed a lease on the apartment the previous week. Her name on the dotted line. Her credit, her deposit, her choice of neighborhood. The furnished rental had become home in the way that places do when you stop treating them as temporary. When you buy a plant, when you hang something on the wall, when you learn which floorboard creaks and find you don't mind the sound. Carter's world had not recovered quietly. The story about Savannah's pregnancy had detonated in the way that stories do when they have enough true detail to sustain themselves. Carter had issued a statement, "This is a private matter and we ask for privacy during a difficult time," which satisfied no one and confirmed everything. Business associates distanced themselves with the smooth efficiency of people who had been looking for a reason. A joint venture he had spent the better part of the year brokering quietly fell apart. The other party, it emerged, had had reservations about Carter's judgment for some time and had found in the current situation sufficient reason to act on them. Savannah left in late November. There was no public announcement. She simply stopped appearing in Carter's social media. And then a mutual acquaintance reported seeing her at JFK with luggage, and then she was gone. Where she went, Vivienne did not know and did not particularly need to. Vivienne heard all of this in pieces. From Harper, from the ambient noise of their shared social world, from the occasional headline she could not entirely avoid. Each time, she waited for the satisfaction she had expected to feel. The vindication. The "I told you so" that the universe was apparently delivering on her behalf. It didn't come. What came instead was quieter and more useful. Release. The slow, steady loosening of something that had been wound tight for years. Each piece of news about Carter's unraveling was not a victory for her. It was simply evidence that she had been right to leave, right to refuse, right to stop measuring herself against a life that had never truly been built to hold her. She was having lunch with Harper on a Wednesday when Harper said, over a bowl of soup, "So, Luca Moretti." "So," Vivienne agreed. "You like him." "I work for him." "Vivienne." Harper put down her spoon. "I've known you for 20 years. I know what you look like when you're trying to talk yourself out of something." He paused. "I also know what you look like when you're losing the argument." Vivienne looked at her soup. She thought about the night in the office with the city behind him. The strand of hair. The "I don't do things halfway." The consistent, unhurried, undeterred patience of a man who had apparently decided on her, and was in no rush to pressure her into deciding back. "He's not simple," Vivienne said. "No. There are parts of his life that are not simple," Harper agreed. "I swore I wouldn't do this. I walked out of that marriage and I told myself." "You told yourself you wouldn't fall for someone to replace Carter," Harper said. "This isn't that. You know it isn't that." She picked up her spoon again. "Carter never looked at you the way people say Luca Moretti looks at you. I've never seen Carter look at you at all, honestly. I always thought he saw his reflection when he looked at you and called it love." The observation sat on the table between them. accurate and a little brutal, the way Harper's observations always were. "What if it doesn't work?" Vivienne asked. "What if it does?" Harper said. She told him that evening. Not with a speech. Vivienne was not a speech person, had never been one for grand declarations, had always believed that the truest things were said quietly and meant it. She was in his office reviewing the Q4 numbers, and he was at his desk with a matte black phone in his hand, and she looked at him. Really looked at him, the way you look at something you have been circling for a long time and have finally decided to move toward, and she said without preamble, "I've decided." He set the phone down. He looked at her. "Have you?" "I'm not interested in being careful anymore," she said. "I was careful for 10 years with someone who didn't deserve it. I'd rather be brave with someone who does." He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood slowly and walked around the desk and stopped in front of her with an expression that was not unreadable for once. She could read it clearly, unmistakably, the way you read something written in a language you have only just realized you already knew. "I'm not an easy life," he said. It wasn't a warning. It was honesty, the same kind he had always given her. "I'm not looking for easy," she said. "I've had easy. It was a very small life." He reached out and took her hand. Her right hand, both of his around it, the way you hold something you have waited for. He looked at her with the full weight of his attention, which was, she had learned, the most considerable thing about him. "Then stay," he said simply. "I'm staying," she said. She bought watercolors that Saturday. A small set, nothing extravagant, with a pad of thick paper and 2 brushes she had to ask the art supply store clerk to help her choose. She set them up at the kitchen table of her West Village apartment, in the gray December light from the window, and she painted badly, rustily, imprecisely, with the uncertain hand of someone reclaiming a skill they had been talked out of years ago. It was wonderful. Harper came over that afternoon and looked at the painting, a rough, color-drunk version of the view from the window, nothing you could call accomplished, and said, "It's a mess." "I know," Vivienne said, and smiled at it. "You look happy," Harper said. She sounded surprised and not surprised at all. "I am," Vivienne said. And what struck her, sitting at her kitchen table with paint on her hands and the city outside and a life that was finally, genuinely, unambiguously her own, what struck her was not the scale of what she had survived. It was not the awareness of how far she had come from the woman standing in a hallway with 4 cardboard boxes and a key that did not turn. What struck her was simpler than all of that. She had walked out of that hallway, and the world had not ended. She had been discarded, and she had not dissolved. She had been told in every way that wasn't quite words, that she was not enough, and she had built herself a life that proved, morning by morning and choice by choice, that she had been more than enough all along. Carter had replaced her. He had thought he was trading up, acquiring something newer and simpler and easier to manage, and he had handed off a woman he did not know how to see. Luca Moretti had seen her from across a hotel bar in the lowest hour of her recent life and had decided, quietly, with the certainty of a man who was not in the habit of being wrong, that she was exactly what she was. Worth everything. Worth more than Carter had ever understood. Worth more than the boxes in the hallway, the changed locks, the smiling woman in her robe. Worth more than the careful, small, accommodating life she had spent 10 years building for someone else. Vivienne Hart set down her paintbrush, looked at the imperfect, beautiful mess on the paper in front of her, and felt, settling into her chest like something that had always been meant to be there. She was never the one left behind. She was the one who got out. Stories by Niksy. If Vivienne's story moved you, shook you, or had you reading past midnight, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Follow the channel and let's keep telling stories that matter.